And in the last, I would say 5 years, coming into middle age, I've realized that this cultural conditioning around isolating and this belief of I can't trust anyone, that was fueled by some of my trauma and also fueled by a lot of cultural messaging that we get. Also, a lot of the pressure to just do it yourself. Yeah, I got it. Take care. Don't be a burden. Do it yourself. And so I consider myself in rehab currently around my tendencies to isolate and be an island. And it is hard for me to reach out to someone vulnerably. It is hard for me to ask for help, but it is a standing challenge I have for myself. And I am in deep study about community and how to build community because it's so clear to me that this is one of the ways that we can deeply heal.
Welcome to the Intrepid Soul Podcast, where we explore what it takes to build a human life that's congruent with your soul. I'm Katie Benway, a mystic, teacher, and author, here to walk with you through the wilds of the human experience as we get to know and get closer to the soul. Let's get curious, courageous, and conscious together.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Intrepid Soul Podcast. I'm thrilled today to have Johanna Hattendorf here with me. Jo and I have been friends and colleagues for years and years. And so let me tell you a little bit about her before we dive in today. Johanna Hattendorf, is on a mission to help stressed out, burnt out, worn out people find healing, comfort, and calm in body, mind, and spirit. As a survivor of childhood trauma and abuse, Johanna has devoted most of her life to healing herself and helping others heal. She has over 30 years of experience sharing her wisdom and healing skill with others. She is a licensed and certified massage therapist, ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, Reiki master and teacher, a second-degree black belt, certified Tai Chi and Qigong instructor, and a trauma-releasing exercise provider. Johanna has led workshops, retreats, seminars, and been the keynote speaker at local, state, and national events. She's been featured on the Progressive Sacred podcast and was a guest lecturer at Harvard University Divinity School for 3 years. Additionally, she is a prolific author. She has contributed regularly to the Starting with Scripture newsletter, had an award-winning sermon published in Best Sermons by Harper and Row, and has published her own poetic memoir, which, might I say, is stunning and beautiful. Johanna's many unique specialties, her sincerity and playful, easygoing style shine in everything that she does, which I can attest to too. Welcome, Jo. Great
Thanks.
to see you.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm so excited.
Me too. So today we're talking about trauma. And, you know, when I was thinking about this, I emailed Jo and I said, everyone throws the word trauma around. We're talking about it as in our society as something that we all understand, that we all seem to identify with. But let's pause and get to the root and the heart of what is trauma. Let's define it. Let's understand it for the purpose of understanding trauma for our own selves. There's a difference between trauma and stress, for instance. There are differences in the way that trauma impacts you. And so we wanted today to get down to some of these roots around definitions, around how does trauma express itself. And here's why, because in Jo's work and my work, we are people who have helped other people heal and deal with trauma for our whole lives. And we see it showing up energetically, psychically, spiritually in the work that we do. And so in addition to really understanding what trauma is and how it manifests in our bodies as human beings, we want to help you make connections between your human experience of trauma and your spirit or your soul's experience of trauma. So we're going to talk a little bit about things that we've experienced with ourselves and with clients. And we're going to give you just a better understanding of how to name and understand trauma in yourself. So there we go. So Jo, could you talk to us a bit about what is trauma? How is it defined? Just give us that kind of basic starting place.
Yes. The best description of trauma I ever heard or learned which is the one I use all the time, is something that is too much, too fast, or goes on for too long of a period of time. And it's not about the narrative or the event of what happened, it's how your body responds to that. So, two people could experience the exact same very difficult event, and one person is able to cope with it in their own way and is fine. Or, they remember it as a horrible thing, right? But when the body responds to something that is overwhelmingly too much, or it happens so fast that there's no way to process it, or it goes on in over an extended long period of time, the body has a natural response that is all about survival. It does not care. The body does not care about I'm sorry, Katie, the spiritual or the emotional or the mental aspects. It's like, oh, we're going to die.
Right.
We have to do these things in order to survive. So anything that is perceived by the brain and the nervous system as being life-threatening, life-altering, life-diminishing, life deadening, those are the circumstances that can create this survival mechanism where the body says, that's too much. We can't process this. It's overwhelming. It's too fast. We can't process this. We're going to die. We have to respond in these ways. And so trauma really is a body and nervous system response to something that is too much, too fast, or goes on for too long a period of time.
And do you think when you're talking about the threat to life, do you think that sometimes there's obviously literal expressions of that? I'm under threat and duress. I could physically die here. Do you think there's also a more figurative aspect of that? So I'm thinking about, like, as a kid, right? Like, if I don't know that food is going to be provided to me, or if I'm not picked up and held, right, to a child, that can feel life-threatening or life-diminishing.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I think, two things can be, depending upon sort of the overlay of what's happening, right? Like somebody who loves roller coasters, they're in a roller coaster and they're excited, right? And that is not, they don't feel that's life-threatening. Someone who doesn't like roller coasters could be on a roller coaster and feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? And if someone forces you to be on a roller coaster and you don't want to be, then that's traumatic, right?
Right.
So it's not about the event. It's about how your body and your brain and your nervous system are processing or not processing what's happening.
Right.
So, I mean, we all know that there are soldiers who go to war and they feel patriotic and they feel like they're doing their duty, and it's hard and it's painful and it's horrible, and yet they don't develop PTSD. And then there are other soldiers who go to war, they feel patriotic and they feel like they're doing their duty, but what they are experiencing is so overwhelming they cannot process it, and that does lead to PTSD. So it's not about the thing, it's about how our body processes it.
That's right. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, one thing that I see with folks is comparing trauma, for instance. And, and I see it actually from people devaluing their own traumatic experiences. This wasn't as bad as what other people have it way worse than I do. And I think one of the ways that we can extend compassion, not just to ourselves, but others, is understanding just what you're saying, which is it's not about the event or like the quote unquote validity of the event.
Right.
It is how our body and mind receive the experience of the event and our capacity to process. And that's not a value judgment either. We're wired the way we're wired.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And while we're talking about body processes, I think it's important to talk about these things that we pass, we sort of glibly talk about, and yet they're so important, right? One, we talk about the fight, flight, freeze response. We know now that there's a fourth one. It's pleasing, right? But fight or flight both have a very similar response in the body, right? There's this inability to breathe, a racing heart, a dry mouth, can't swallow, tight muscles, can't think straight, feel angry and frustrated or anxious. Those are all part of the fight or flight response. The freeze response kind of has a separate component to it, which is this kind of numbing or flat, apathetic, right? I don't want to do anything. I don't want to eat. I don't want to sleep. I feel dead or numb inside, depressed, disinterested. And then there's this pleasing component, which is I'm going to try and do everything I can to take care of this other person so that I don't get hurt, right? So we give a lot of lip service to these things, but we don't really understand that those can become stuck in our bodies. And so what might help you to survive in a moment can get trapped in your body, and then you don't know how to get out of that. So if you're attacked and you're able to run away, then you've completed a cycle, and that's a process of like, oh, I was afraid for my life. I ran, I got away, right? If you can't get away, what do? Well, okay, so maybe if you are able to fight back and you get away, that's a different kind of a process, right? If you can't get away, if you're a tiny child, right? And you cannot run and you cannot fight, what resources do you have at your in your biology? Well, right? Think about little insects. Think about the possum who sleeps, right? Freezes, right? Insects in the wild will freeze against their background who are camouflaged, and they are saved because they freeze, right? So maybe as a little child, you freeze up and then you stay frozen, right?
Yes.
Or if you're growing up in a household where it's chaos and you don't have enough to eat and there's abuse and all of the crap, right? Maybe you grow up being really, really good at monitoring your background and what's happening and making sure that mom isn't mad or dad isn't mad so that maybe you can sleep or, maybe you'll get a decent meal or, right? So we can't judge necessarily about what the event was, but we can talk about how our body responds to those events. And, how the outcome is dependent in part upon our success at using whatever those tools are.
Right. And if you don't have some of those tools, right? Or if you've never been taught some of those tools, right? Can you tell the story? So just to set the background, and we'll talk about TRE, trauma releasing exercises later.
Sure.
But Jo is a TRE practitioner. And years ago, I was in a class that Jo was teaching, and she was leading those of us in the class through these trauma releasing exercises. And she told this story, and it was illustrative and really helpful around what does it look like when trauma is stuck in your body, and why are these trauma releasing exercises so powerful and impactful? But do you remember the story you told about, I think it was like the deer or the gazelle being chased? And then the herd would come around. I felt like that story was so instructive.
Yes.
And I have thought about it so often ever since. Like, have I been able to have a gazelle-like experience after this trauma? But go ahead, tell the story.
Well, imagine, right? The gazelle and the lions all drink at the same watering hole, right? And so suppose a lion at the watering hole decides, oh, there's a gazelle and I want it. And it chases the gazelle. And if that gazelle is able to get away from the lion. If it runs really fast, if it gets enough of a jump ahead of the lion and it runs really fast, it goes and rejoins its herd, and the herd makes a circle around the gazelle to provide safety for it. And then the gazelle stops and shakes and shakes and shakes and shakes. And then once it stops shaking, then all of the gazelles, run off together. So there is this element of so that's the flight response, right? The flight response. But what happens then is the body resets. And there's so many ways for the body to reset. And what happens is in trauma, that gets stuck in the body if we don't reset.
Right.
And there's so many ways to reset, but when we have that trauma that gets stuck in the body and doesn't get released, then we end up with, years and years and years down the road, still dealing with, oh my God, I was attacked by a lion.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. When you shared that story in the class, it was so helpful. And I have thought about it so much since, because I think, okay, in an ideal situation, the threat comes, I'll put it in context of me. I respond however I need to respond,
right,
to get myself to a safe place.
Right.
So maybe that's emotionally, maybe that's physically,
right,
maybe that's energetically. And then ideally in community or in a safe place,
right,
I would be able to move that trauma out of my body physically or vibrationally, speaking about it, crying, screaming, etc.
Right.
And when I think about that as like quote unquote ideal. And then when I think about our society and what ails us, it's really that sort of last part that we're missing, right? The community of gazelles.
Yes.
I think a lot of us are hard pressed to call in the community of gazelles that we can shake out trauma with.
Right.
And we don't often have the opportunity to come out of the trauma, to express it. And whether that's that opportunity doesn't exist, the safety doesn't exist, or we're culturally conditioned to not cry, to not express, right? We shame ourselves. So I'm just sharing this and because that story that you told was so helpful in helping me understand kind of an ideal way to move through a traumatic experience. And it also helped me identify where, as humans societally, we're really missing a piece in that trauma expression and recovery component.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, because it is the thing that makes trauma different from stress, right? Because a stressful event, we can process that and get through it pretty easily with, our own whatever it is that we use for self-care. But with trauma, the body doesn't reset automatically unless we have that sense of safety and a sense of community and a sense of resources, right? And those are the things that make the difference between a gazelle that runs off by itself and a gazelle that runs to the herd, and the herd says, oh, we got you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And how do we find that place of, I've got you, right? And I think that part of what happens, which is so devastating, is trauma disconnects us. It disconnects us. It interrupts that sense of connection, whether it's to a friend, a loved one, a partner, a spouse, a community, right? And so trauma makes us withdraw and close in, or it makes us explosive, right? And explode out. But what happens then is we've ruptured those connections. And how do we find a space for healing if we don't have even a connection within ourselves anymore? We doubt ourselves. We doubt the people that we thought we could trust. We doubt the people that should be our friends, but they don't understand. We doubt people, right? We doubt God. Like, where the hell was God? Right. Where was God if God's supposed to watch over me? God was watching all of this and not helping me in any way, right? So it creates such a disconnect,
Yes.
that trauma keeps us trapped in trauma.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's why, I mean, so many of you, if you've worked with me, you know Joe, because I refer people all the time to Joe, and I, as a practitioner, I'm someone who has conversations with people and is a safe place for people. And people can speak things that they've never spoken or share secrets. And then I would often say to folks, hey, go see Johanna, because what Johanna does is she helps people get into the body and make space and clear and give voice and move things out, and do the shaking out, whether that's sort of literal or figurative or in some kind of other way, and get and restore that connection to self. And I think, I mean, I so appreciate the point you're making, because trauma, and I think especially in our human societies, disconnects us from like the community or the caregiver or the person or the source, and then it disconnects us from ourselves. Like I feel like in our societies we have this double whammy, because there's a thing that happens that disconnects us from safety, community, caregiver, etc. And then and I don't know, maybe it's just the human way, Joe, but then there's this sort of next thing that happens, which is there must be something unlovable about me. There must be something fundamentally wrong. I don't belong anywhere. Oh my, why did God forsake me? I'm right. And so then we disconnect from ourselves. And I think you and I see this
over and over.
And it's why I would often everybody enlist Joe to do some healing work and and help, right? Because there's this, let's get you back to yourself. And in processing and talking about what happened, what cut you off from vitality, some version of vitality, belonging to a family, having your needs met, belonging to source, etc. Let's talk that out and process that and name it and understand it. But then also what's still there is that fundamental disconnection from self.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you've got the Intrepid Soul, right? It's not just a fundamental separation from who I perceive myself to be, but also from my own spirit, my own soul, right? And but that sense of like, I'm here for a reason, I have a purpose in life. There's this connection to soul, soul to source, whatever. But, I think that really trauma is life altering. Whether it's a one-time event or something that happens over the course of time, it changes us at the very core of our being. And it changes how we perceive ourselves, but it changes how we are then in the world and how we are with others. And that's what makes it different from stress as well, because stress is stressful. It's hard, it's painful, it's difficult, maybe, but in stress, we are able to come back to ourselves. But with trauma, we don't just come back to ourselves. That we're stuck.
Yeah.
And we need to have this connection with whether it's community or God or source or something. We have to reconnect in order to come back to ourselves.
Yeah. Do you think that, and I'm just thinking out loud, do you think that it is necessary to connect out in order to connect in? Is that the value of assistance, and whether that's the assistance of one person or the assistance of a group?
Right. I do think that there is something about connecting out.
Yeah.
It's us out of that trauma space.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't want to diminish, the people who go, I mean, I'm just not a meditator. I'm really not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But I think that that's a path that helps people to break the patterns also, because when you are meditating, you're trying to develop that witnessing part of your own self so that you become the witness for your own experience, and you witness your thoughts, and you witness like, oh, here I am again, there I am getting mad about this or whatever, right? So I do think it's possible to have an inner path of connection, that precedes an outer path of connection that
Sure.
comes before. But I think that most people, and I'm an introvert, so I'm very in my own self, but I think most people find it easier to make an external connection and then
Mhm.
have that mirrored back as an internal connection.
Yeah. One of my favorite spiritual teachers is Carolyn Mace.
Okay.
And she talks a lot about the value of what she calls spiritual direction,
Yeah.
that we need some kind of we need a person to journey with us. And
Yes.
she talks about, so her language, she uses the word soul a lot, also God. And so she'll talk about, I can't go into your soul with you, but I can hold sentry. I can be here while you go into your soul.
Right.
And that's always just resonated with me. And I think that that's really beautiful. And when I think about people who have meditation practices, and I have someone in my life who has an exquisite meditation practice, and he has had profound breakthroughs about his own internal trauma
Right.
on his own, in his own meditation practice. And
Right.
so, but what I think about that is that his ability to disconnect from self, to go in, like there is sort of a disconnect in going in and then coming back up and bringing it whole again.
Right.
And I love it that works so beautifully for him. I think a lot of people find my trauma is best accessed when I am in the company of a really safe, invested listener.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I write, and
Mm.
I've spent years and years and years and years journaling, and that's one of the ways that I do that internal piece. This is what happened. This is how I felt about it. And this weird belief that I have about this. But is that really true? And it enables me to talk to myself through the word, right? And I think perhaps, that is a kind of meditation, right? It's a kind
Yeah.
of self-reflection done through writing. I'm I'm good at talking it through with people, but not always, because I kind of have to figure out what I think before I say it.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of people, my wife included,
Mm.
don't know what they think until they say it. And so
Yeah.
that's when you need a skilled listener. If you need a skilled listener who can reflect back to you or just be present while you put it into words, that's huge. But if you're
Mm.
sitting at home frozen
Yes.
because you're frozen from the trauma and you're eating ice cream or numbing out on Netflix or, reading cozy mysteries. I love cozy mysteries. Those are the things that just keep you frozen.
Right.
And so there's a piece of this that is connection
Yes.
has to be the primary beginning point, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I think when I think about breaking cycles and patterns that come out of trauma, because as we know, I don't want to jump too far ahead of us, but as we know, trauma that stays stuck in your body just then plays itself out.
Right. Over and over and over
Right.
again.
Like theater in your life in order to get your attention, essentially.
Right.
And it can be really hard because you can be in those cycles and it can be hard to see, I know this is causing me angst and pain. Why is this happening yet again? Here I am suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to sort of like shame yourself and turn in on yourself. Look, here I am. There's no reason to, be hopeful. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of my point for bringing this up is honoring, some of my advice to folks would be honoring the instinct, even if it's a whisper at times, to connect out. And maybe it's reading your book, Joe. And maybe it's not a conversation with Johanna. It's reading Johanna's book.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I can connect with a person who's experienced the kind of abuse I have.
Right.
And it inspires me to take another step. Right. But that part of the medicine for trauma is connecting to the larger human experience, the herd, the village, however you do that. And that it's right and good and true, those instincts you have, to get connected and find something you can trust.
Right.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, well said. I think, no, go ahead.
We want to talk about, there's so many things we could talk about.
I know.
So you had mentioned to me, and I would love to have you explain this for folks, trauma and resources, a way to look at trauma and resources. And you were kind of talking about like a grid and all of these great organizational things. So can you explain that to us?
Sure. So this was not original to me. I wish that I could say where the source was. I was at a conference. I took notes, and I can't even tell you who the speaker was, right? But I loved the concept so much, and it has really helped me so much. So if you think about some traumas in our lives are, if you can categorize them as a little t trauma, right? It's not this huge life altering event or a near death experience, but it was traumatic in that it was overwhelming. It was too much, too fast, right? So a little trauma. But let's say that you're a person who's pretty resilient. You've got a good sense of yourself. You've got great friends. You've got great family and loved ones, and you have adequate financial resources, and you've got a cultural community that you lean into. So that is a little t trauma. You've got lots of resources and you have access to really good resources. And so that trauma is not going to be as stuck. It will not take so long to recover from or to move out of, because you have a lot of resources. Now, take a big T trauma, like sustained childhood abuse, or it doesn't even matter. A big T trauma that for you was just so life altering that you don't know how you're going to come back from it. And you have access to resources. So you've got excellent medical care. You've got great insurance. You can get as much counseling as you need. You've got support networks. You've got people who love you. You've got friends. You've got access to group therapy. Physical therapy. You have got all the things. It will take time. It will be hard. And yet that big T trauma, supported by lots of resources, means that you can have a hope of connecting and being someone that is still who you are. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Now, take a little T trauma that you don't have a lot of resources for. Right? So maybe you're really isolated. And maybe you don't have a lot of friends, and maybe you spend your days, pretty much alone, and you don't have the financial resources, and some small thing happens. It's traumatic. It's still overwhelming, but it's kind of a little T trauma. And you are reacting as if it is the end of the world. And the people around you are saying things to you like, good Lord, it's not the end of the world. Why are you reacting this way? Why are you reacting in such a big way to something that is relatively small? Now, that's an external judgment, and it can easily become an internalized judgment, and it can leave you stuck in a place of hopelessness, right? Right. Even though it's a little trauma, you don't have any resources. And so you don't even have a way to process it. And now it has affected your life in really some very seriously negative ways. So that's even with a little trauma. Now talk about a big, huge trauma, like a big T trauma that is so overwhelming, so life-threatening, so life-altering. You thought you were going to die. And now you have no community, no friends who understand. You've come back from the war. Your wife is afraid of you. You don't have good financial resources. And the VA isn't providing you with good financial resources, right? You don't have access to medical care. You never had a spiritual community to begin with. And so what's the point of that? And now what you're talking about is chronic PTSD.
Right. Right.
right? And so these are, it's not like these are hard and fast categories, but it's helpful to understand that the right resources, whether
Yes.
it's a small T trauma or a big T trauma, the right resources make a huge difference.
Yes.
And not having resources dooms us
Yes.
to being stuck and hopeless.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. It's something that in the 15 years of work I have done with other people, I have become more and more tuned in to justice, to social justice, to
Right.
right, because there are systems in place
Mm-hmm.
that inherently disadvantage other people.
Right.
They're racist systems, they're sexist systems, they're all of the systems.
Right.
And I see these things at play in people's lives. And because I am someone who has worked with thousands of people, from the spectrum of very few resources to copious amounts of resources, I can attest to that someone's, I would say, like buoyancy, their ability to move through something when they're well resourced. And
Right.
and like frankly, in our human world, money is a huge piece of this, right? Getting the care that you need is a huge piece of this. So when you're well resourced, you have better access
Right.
to what you need to recover, right?
Yes.
And so I think about that. I think about justice. I think about injustice. I think about socially what needs to change in our world. And then I think about and I am a recovering isolationist. My trauma response was and at times still is, but I really work on it. But for most of my life it was to isolate. And it sort of looked kind of I think you could argue that I didn't isolate because it looked like I was friends with everyone. But I was very isolated. Very few people knew how I felt, what I was going through. I supported other people, right? I was this sort of friendly extrovert. And in the last, I would say 5 years, coming into middle age, I've realized that this cultural conditioning around isolating and this belief of I can't trust anyone, that was fueled by some of my trauma and also fueled by a lot of cultural messaging that we get.
Right.
Also a lot of the pressure to just do it yourself. Yeah, I got it. Take care. Don't be a burden. Do it yourself. And so I consider myself in rehab currently around my tendencies to isolate and be an island.
Yeah.
And it is hard for me to reach out to someone vulnerably. It is hard for me to ask for help, but it is a standing challenge I have for myself.
Yeah.
And I am in deep study about community and how to build community.
Right.
Because it's so clear to me that this is one of the ways that we can deeply heal. And money aside, hard to set money aside, but money aside, if you have a loving, safe community, there's so much recovery and healing and returning back to yourself that you can do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a huge difference. It really does.
It really does. And I think here's what I also think while I'm on the soapbox. I think that we as a culture need to develop so much more compassion and empathy around the resources and how inequitably distributed they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we judge someone else about what they're experiencing and what they're doing, we likely don't understand what resources they have and don't have. Right?
That's exactly.
And we're often encouraged to judge other people and their experiences, but here's the truth. I mean, we live in a culture that does not honor the very natural human need to express what we've gone through, whether that's in quiet conversation, whether that's in art or song or writing or, at a 12-step meeting.
Right.
And so this kind of vulnerability and sharing, this is fundamental not only to our own healing, but it's fundamental to building community. And I see that as a real tipping point for us as a society right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I think you're absolutely right. It really makes me understand. I understand this anyway, but there is a way in which when we experience trauma, sometimes we're even told, right? Don't tell anybody.
Yes.
Don't tell. Don't
Keep it
tell.
family secret.
Keep it secret, right? Whether it's we're keeping a secret that's a family secret, or this secret that's only between you and me, but we are told over and over again, don't tell, right? And don't go to the police, don't get help, because that's all about telling.
Mm.
And so not only do we feel like we're isolated, but we also, our voice has literally been stopped,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's nobody who can say, I hear you, I've got you, because we cannot speak the unspeakable.
Mm.
And people, it's really funny. I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, yeah, I had childhood sexual abuse, right? And people just like are like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then that's the end of it, right? And that's fine. I don't need to tell my whole big story, right? I wrote it down in a book and you can read it if you want to, right? But I think that there is this piece about not being able to use our voice,
Yeah.
which keeps us isolated and unconnected, and
Mm-hmm.
not being heard, or only being superficially heard, right?
Right.
That not only disconnects us from the community, as you say, which we desperately need, but it disconnects us from ourselves, because now we can't even tell the truth to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And I think about, in times of deep struggle and deep pain and deep strife, the way that people create art and
Yes.
music, the way
Right.
that people tell stories,
Right.
um, oral traditions passed down during times of great suffering. There's
Yes.
that wonderful story about the cellist of Sarajevo playing his cello. I think it was 30 days straight in the middle of bombing, in the middle of a street. It's and so these stunning stories of people just compelled to share their voice, right? And in the middle of trauma or difficulty or the seemingly impossible, or my days may be numbered. I'm in the middle of a war and bombing and I'm going to play every day.
Right. Well,
Right.
look at what we did as a world during COVID. Think about all the musicians that sat on their porches and sang. Think
Yes.
about all the people that sat, a safe distance away and talked with each other. And, think about all the ways that we all found our ways to Zoom and talking to people on Zoom. I mean, there was this incredible worldwide trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we all said, no, I can't. I gotta reach out to people. I've got to connect to
Mm-hmm.
other people, right? I can't do this alone. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
do this alone. And I think that's true. We cannot heal alone.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Are there other things that we want to talk about or touch on around coming back to self?
Yes.
If you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, I got trauma. Yeah, I've got some work to do.
So what the fuck do I do now?
Right. What's next? Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, so what I think is so helpful for people to understand is our experience of trauma is from the brain into the body. And our healing from trauma is from the body up into the brain. And that this is the beautiful gift that Stephen Porges, with his polyvagal theory, gave to us, which is that there are connections that run all the way up from the gut, all the way up to the brain, that give the brain a message of, oh, you know what? I'm safe. I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so if we follow the path of the vagus nerve, and incidentally, the vagus nerve, in case people don't know, is called the vagus nerve because it's a vagabond, because it goes, like, it wanders through the body. It's a vagabond nerve. And so it's called the vagus nerve because that's a fancy Latin word for it, right? But What if we were to start at the top of our body and come down, then we would be following that vagabond pathway. And those pathways go up from the body into the brain. So if you think about um, connection to your body and the outside world, right? If you start with your eyes, if you're in some kind of a funk and you just like literally look and you can name like 5 things that you see, and you can be as descriptive as you want. Just name 5 things. Look around, turn your head, turn your eyes. There's a weird thing about trauma that it makes us hyper focused in front of us. And so if you turn your head and you use your eyes to look around you, it breaks that hyper focus that's in front of you. And you can say, oh, wow, there's a tree outside my window. Oh, look at this. I have a beautiful stone on my desk. Oh, wow, look at all those wonderful books I've got over there on my bookshelf, right? Mm-hmm. So we start with the eyes. And then you can listen. Like, what do I hear? What do I hear all around me? Oh, right now I hear the ticking of my clock, the sound of my own voice, right? What do I hear? You can change something in almost a minute by smiling. Like 7 seconds or something. Why do we watch those silly cat videos? And why do we watch the videos of people landing on their asses and whatever it is that we think is funny? It lifts our mood because it says to the brain, oh, look, we're laughing. I'm safe. I'm laughing. Who doesn't want to smile at a baby, right? You look at little baby videos and you're smiling and your brain says, oh, we're safe. I'm safe, right? Singing, yelling, chanting, humming, right? Using your voice, speaking your truth. When I was doing my healing work, I would get into my car and turn up the radio really loud and drive down the highway and yell at the top of my lungs. I would just yell, just like, and sometimes it was just like a primal scream kind of thing. And other times it was just yelling, no, 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 over and over and over again, because I could never say no to what was happening.
Right.
But saying no in the safety of my car. And if I figured, well, if people pass me, maybe they're going to think I'm singing music or something, right? But yelling was hugely important to me, right? So using your voice, that's another piece on the vagal pathway. And then you get to the heart, right? And the heart. And that's where our emotional connection is. And that's where we can connect to ourselves, but we can also connect to other people, or we can watch, little babies on the video and, be like, oh, look at the little baby, right? It's so cute. It's so sweet. And when we look at babies, doesn't everybody pretty much universally just be like, oh, right. If it's not a human baby, you can look at animal babies and you have that same response, right?
Right.
The body responds and says, oh, I'm safe. I'm safe, right? And then we get to the breath. And I get so frustrated when people, like, if someone's stressed and somebody says, oh, just take a deep breath. You cannot take a deep breath if you're frozen. You just cannot.
Right.
It's not possible. People go, that's not a deep breath. A deep breath comes from a relaxed, soft place. So you kind of have to go through these other pieces to get soft enough,
right,
that you can breathe. And, what I say to people is like, let your exhale get longer. And don't worry about the deep breath part. Let your exhale be longer. That creates more space and more room, and unfreezes your lungs and your diaphragm, so that when you take in the next breath, it is deeper by itself. You don't have to force yourself to breathe deeply. Just blow out a breath, and then the next breath will come easier. Right? And then you get down to the gut, right? There's this weird stuff that happens in the fight, flight, freeze response where, people get diarrhea or constipation or irritable bowel syndrome or acid reflux. And those are all parts of the body's response to trauma and stress. So how do we relax the gut? How do we relax the gut? And I think one of the ways that we can do that is, for one thing, we have to follow the vagal nerves, right? We need to start at the top and work to the bottom. So gut is going to be more towards the end of the thing or the journey. But we begin to say, how do I nurture myself?
Right.
How do I love myself? Can I love my belly no matter what the size of it is? Can I bring nourishment into my body? Can I stop restricting my nourishment or overdoing the nourishment? What is gentle? What is soft? What is easy? Right? So, there's a lot more that I could say about all of that, but I think that beginning to understand that trauma is a brain nervous system down and healing is a body system up.
So something that I've gotten started to get into, that has been really healing for me and really hard for me.
Okay.
Is moving / dancing.
Yeah, right.
And it's not even, I don't even know if I would call it dancing. It feels like movement asked for by my body.
Yes.
And so I'll share this story. So the person in my life who has a wonderful meditation practice, he wanted to teach me his meditation practice. And I got very angry and very irritable. Okay. Some of it was because, of what I do for a living, is lead people through guided meditation. But, and after some conversation and some space, here's what I realized. What I was irritated about was part of his meditation practice includes sitting up and sitting still. But it's about stillness, right? And it works impeccably for him. And what I realized, and again, like after I reacted and there was a little tussle and 3 days later, I realized that my body was like, stop making me sit still. Stop making me be still. Your pathway to your next level of healing is not found through stillness. I want to move.
Right.
And I feel like something deep in my body has been saying I want to move for a long time. And it's been bumping up against my freeze response, okay? And it feels really vulnerable to me to let my body move, even alone, everybody. I'm not particularly athletic. I danced as a kid, but it's there's something vulnerable to me about movement.
Yes.
Okay. So after this little tussle about meditation, nothing like arguing about meditation with someone, but hey, what a great invitation. Like this is a trigger. Something hit me. Why don't I go see about this? And so I said to my body, I'm not going to ask you to sit still to learn meditation. It's okay that has led to tremendous breakthroughs for him. That's not where I am.
Right.
What do you need? And my body asked me to put on tribal music and trust it and just start moving. And it feels so vulnerable to me to do it. I mean, I could sit here and talk into a microphone about this challenge and not feel vulnerable, but to actually execute this is so vulnerable for me. So I've been doing this in the shower when I'm home alone because I feel so vulnerable that I can't even be out in the open. And I put on tribal music and I just move. So it's not dancing per se. It's moving how my body is requesting that I move. And I will tell you that, so there's probably people out there who say, oh, that's somatic, Katie. That's what you're doing. I know there's probably names for everything I'm doing.
Right.
I'm just in like the organic dirt of it. And so I stand in the shower and then I have this music on and I just start moving the way that my body wants me to move. And do you know that inevitably every single time, very quickly, within like seconds, I will start getting images or flashbacks of old trauma, but not in a way that's problematic or debilitating. It is literally like it's leaving my body. And then I will be aware that there's a certain part of my body that's being activated by my movement. And the reason I felt called to share this was when you talked about, stomach or gut. And recently when I had done this, there was just these like couple of nights in a row where I saw this image of like lower stomach, sort of between belly button and pubic bone. And there were these images and snapshots coming up and out that trauma, by the way, that I'm familiar with, like, yep, that happened.
Right.
But it was like it was coming out of my body and dissipating. And I was really tuned into, there was some beneficial impact to my physical body that I have yet to name.
Yeah.
So I am very much in this very cool experiment. I've gotten surrendered to it, triggered by a little snit with my partner. And I could have lost myself in the snit. And instead, I'm wise enough to say, hey, fighting about meditation tells me there's something I need to know, right? So I had the courage to go in and be honest. And I've had the courage to dance or move in the shower. And I'm really surrendered to and in awe of what's happening in my being, that now I look forward to doing it in the shower each night. And I almost don't want to know the name of what I'm doing or like the scientific explanation. I'm not telling you not to share, but I'm so surrendered into the process, and it feels so raw and just like the medicine I need right now.
I love that, Katie. That is so beautiful. I love it. I love that you're finding this pathway on your own, right? And because you have this great connection with your, what was the word you were used for him? Your companion, your partner.
Oh, my partner. Yeah.
Right? Because you have such a beautiful connection to him, you were able to be angry, but also then to be self-reflective.
Right.
And to figure out like, oh, what's going to work for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that there's such a huge piece of that, right? You have this beautiful connection with him. It feels like a safe container. And that allows you the space to say, well, your way isn't my way, but here's a way that I think could be my way.
Right.
And I think that's it. That's the point of all of this, right?
Yes.
How do we feel safe enough that we can then open ourselves to our own inner experience and to the connection with other people? How do we find our own path? Mm-hmm. Sure, there are a gazillion tools and resources that you can use, but what's the one that's right for you? Mm-hmm. And that's going to change over time, maybe, right? What worked for me when I was 40 doesn't work for me now that I'm 68. So, long distance bicycling is not in my wheelhouse anymore. Not doing that anymore, right? But and not even like hard style kung fu, like punch and kick and scream and yell. That's not going to work for me. I'm like, no, I'll stick with my Tai Chi and my Qigong, right? I just think that when we feel safe, when we have connections, then we are able to follow the path that leads us to where we need to go for our own healing. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be different for everybody, right?
That's right. And that spot of surrender, right? And I guess what I mean by surrender is like the leap of faith it took for me to move my body.
Right.
So it's about pushed against a lot of discomfort. It still doesn't feel completely safe. It doesn't. And so there is an amount of the word for me is there is an amount of me saying I'm gonna try it. So I don't feel completely safe moving in the shower. I don't or gosh, it makes me feel weird or uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid of the outcome. It's the vulnerability. It's the freedom of it. It's the freedom of it. It still feels odd to me. Mm-hmm. And so I I didn't feel safe before I started. I just really trusted that what was calling me was safe. And so then I was able to say, okay, I'll meet you probably more than halfway. Like I don't feel quite safe yet. I don't feel quite comfortable.
Right.
And yet I know it's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that what's calling me is safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can do this hard thing.
Yeah.
And use maybe some faith, or I feel like that's the word. It for me is faith that I'm going to respond to this and something is going to happen. There'll be some kind of breakthrough.
Yeah.
And there has been.
I love
there has been.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction too, of like, there are times we just have to step out with courage. We just have to step out with trust of some kind that there's going to be a good conclusion to this, even if it feels scary and hard right now. Sort of like me coming onto this podcast, feeling nervous.
Right. You were really stressed.
I was really stressed. I was nervous. And yet I trust you. I trust myself, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this hard thing. And something hopefully good will come from it. Right. Yeah. So, and I do think that that's how healing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Stepping out, as you say, stepping out in trust.
That's right. That's right. And that's what I would like to encourage people to do is you won't always know that something is all safe, or there won't be the perfect herd of fellow gazelles around you.
Right, exactly.
And it might be that you just have a good feeling about the practitioner you're reaching out to, or a couple of friends have recommended it.
Right.
Or it just, like for me, getting in the shower and putting on tribal music and moving, it just feels right. Mm-hmm. And though it creates some discomfort in me, it's like I knew there was a knowing that it was a right step to take for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to just illuminate that and draw that out for people. That it can, especially when you're not well resourced, it can feel really daunting to find a person or a group or a thing or a practice that feels trustworthy. But those little tiny fingertip touches into something that's trustworthy, that carries you into a deeper place. I mean, that it builds that safety. It builds your comfort with more vulnerability. It builds momentum for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's important.
It is. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You're beautiful.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for being here for this conversation.
Thank you for asking me. It's been really wonderful. It's lovely.
This has been good. So at the Intrepid Soul Collective, under the podcast collection, I have a place where people can write questions into us. Oh. And so I'd like to invite people who are listening, if you have questions about what we're talking about, we could have 10 more of these conversations about practices or nuances, et cetera, et cetera. And so we know that this is by no means exhaustive. And so if you have questions, if they're general, if they're conceptual, if you have questions about your own personal experiences or want some advice, I encourage you to drop those questions, like I said, at the Intrepid Soul Collective under the podcast collection. And I'll collect those. And Joe, if you're willing, maybe we, hop on and do a Q&A episode.
Sure.
Some of these questions. Yeah, we'd love to be able to give you real practical answers, solutions, insight, resources.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. So if you've got a question, do that. You can certainly drop it anonymously. And we'd love to help.
Yay.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. This was awesome.
Thank you to everyone who has listened. I love you. I appreciate you. Thanks for being on the journey and learning with both of us. We'll talk to you soon.
Hi there. Thanks so much for tuning in for this episode today. Inspired by Johanna's definition of trauma, anything that happens that's too much, too fast, too soon, or goes on for too long, over at the Intrepid Soul Collective on Patreon, I have created for you a short guided meditation and somatic experience. And this is designed to very gently help you connect into your body with energy, stuck, traumatized energy that wants to be released. This is not about connecting to the story or the narrative or reliving an event. It's simply about learning to get into your body, to tap into energy that's ready to go. It's ready to move out, and learning how to use breath and movement and grounding to move that energy out and reclaim that space for you. I hope you check it out. I hope you find it useful. This is the kind of exercise that if you like it and it's effective, you could do this as often as you'd like to. All right, I'll see you at the collective. Thank you for joining me here on the Intrepid Soul Podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation and the work of your soul, join me over on Patreon at the Intrepid Soul Collective. There you'll find tons of resources and support connected to the conversations we have here to help you make your soul work practical and embodied. There are live sessions with me, bonus Q&As where you can go deeper with me and my guests, companion guided meditations and ceremonies, and so much more. Because we can't just talk about it, we've got to become it. Check out the show notes for details and links, and hit follow on this podcast. It'll keep new episodes at the top of your feed, and it helps me build the Intrepid Soul community. Until next time, take good care of yourself and your soul.